Hi Algebra, in lesson 4 here we're going to be looking at keeping track of the steps that we do in an expression. Here we go. Here we have 4 steps and we have to decide which order they go in to end up with this expression in A. So first thing, I'm looking at my variable w and I'm seeing what we did first. It looks like the first thing we did was multiply by 3. When I multiply w by 3, I'll end up with 3w. The next thing it looks like we did was subtract 5 because this division with this fraction bar looks like it's happening after we subtract 5. Once we subtract 5, we now would have 3w minus 5. The next step we did was divide by 2. And then this last step, we can see that we added 7 onto the end. Looking ahead here, the first thing we did to n was add 12. So we end up with n plus 12. The next thing we can see that division underneath all of that, so that would be divide by 4. So we'd have n plus 12 divided by 4. Next we subtracted 10. That's the minus 10 part. So we'd have n plus 12 divided by 4 minus 10. The last step was multiply by 2, and that's where that 2 comes from outside the parentheses. Here I started with Malika's number 12 and I followed all of the steps and I ended up with the number of -8. Here's our steps for part B. First step would be to divide by 4 and I can see that right here because C is being divided by 4. Then we're subtracting 10 because all of that's happening in parentheses. Then we multiply by 2, then we add 12. Here's my steps using Malika's number of 12 to start with. Divided by 4, subtract 10, multiply that by 2, and then add 12, end up with -2. So notice that even though we use the same steps in A and B, because the steps were in different orders, we do end up with different answers at the end, which means that the order we do the steps in is really important. So just make sure you're keeping note of that. Here we're going to match the expressions with their instructions. So looking at number 5, I have a number n. It looks like I multiplied by 4 first, then I subtracted 18, then I divided by 2, which means that this one matches up best with the instructions for B right there. In number 6, looks like we multiply by 4 first, then divide by 2, and then subtract 18 last, which means that this one best matches up with A. In number 7, we're subtracting 18 first, that's in parentheses, then we're multiplying by 4, then we're dividing everything by 2. Now I might be tempted to match number 7 up with C, but this part right here, subtract it from 18, doesn't match what's happening here. Here we're doing n and subtracting 18. Down here in number 8, this is where we're taking n and subtracting it from 18. So that is going to be something you really want to pay attention to. 8 is going to match with C, which means 7 matches with D, none of the above. Right below this, there's a little orange note that talks about the difference between subtracting a number and subtracting a number from something. Check your work on numbers 9 through 12. Make sure you're asking questions if any of this doesn't make sense. Starting in number 13, we're going to write out the instructions on our own here. So we're going to start with think of a number. Then up here we see that we're going to subtract that number from 10, that's important. And then we're going to divide by 2, and then we're going to subtract 19 at the end. And that's because we can see that all of this is being divided by 2, and then we subtract 19. So first thing after we think of a number is subtract 9. Then we multiply by 6. Then we divide by 3. Here's your steps for number 5. Think of a number, then multiply that by 10. Subtract from 3, that's an important piece there. And then lastly, multiply by 5. All right, that's where we're stopping for lesson 4. So if you have any questions, make sure you're asking a neighbor, make sure you're asking me, send me an email, whatever it takes. Put your questions at the end of the video. I want to help you get those questions answered. So make sure you're putting them in there or asking them in class. Take care.